and the whole bit. So, and then I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, and a question for you.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm just watching the thing go live, so.
We're live, that's awesome. Go ahead, Marcus.
Emily, I'm gonna do a little intro where I'm gonna acknowledge sponsors and the whole, mute that. So that's the YouTube link that I just put up there.
Perfect.
I'm going to send it to Sarah.
This is all just one big exciting experiment.
There is.
I love it. Live, that's awesome.
Hang in there 1 second. Okay.
Oh.
Is that just your ringtone or?
That was me.
Okay. Okay.
Annie Barbour's here.
Hello.
Hey.
So your timing is perfect because we were just going to get started.
Excellent. Sorry, guys.
Great.
So we're just going to get started with our second edition of Living Room Talkbacks. This is about A Midsummer Night's Dream. We have members of the cast here and the director, Emily Van Fleet, is going to be moderating. But before we jump in, I just want to give a quick shout out to the sponsors who made A Midsummer Night's Dream possible. Excel Energy was the sponsor of the show, as well as Diana and Mike Kinsey, who sponsored the entirety of the Black Box season at the Arvada Center this year. So we're grateful to them for all their support. And I'm going to turn off my video because I am the least interesting thing going on right now. And to let you all jump in. So
thank you, Marcus. You sell yourself short. Marcus is going to be behind the scenes, kind of operating the tech aspect of this chat. Hello, everyone. My name is Emily Van Fleet, and I was the director of A Midsummer Night's Dream at the Arvada Center Black Box. So we are here on what is our second ever Living Room Talkback, which on this snowy day, Monday in Colorado, for those of you who are watching from around the globe, I'm sure it is quite snowy here, and we have it is piling up in Arvada where I live. So I have my little mug with my tea, and a few of us have some fireplaces or fireplace apps that we are playing to make us feel nice and cozy. I hope that you are all sitting down with your hot toddy and ready to snuggle in and listen to some chats about our production of Midsummer Night's Dream. So last week, there was a talk back about our production of Murder on the Orient Express. And that was led by Jeffrey Kent, the director of that production. I don't know about y'all if you were able to tune in, but it warmed my heart so much to hear that chat about the show and the process of creating that production. It was a really special production, just beautiful in every way, the performances and the design aspects. And so it was really nice because we got word that we had to shut down the season. I guess it was sometime mid-March, and a lot of us didn't get to say goodbye or have any kind of closure. And for those of you in theater, you kind of understand that the ceremony of openings and closings are very important, and we didn't get them. So it's kind of nice to have these chatbacks because it's an opportunity, to share what our process was with those of you who were lucky enough to see the performances. And for those of you who didn't get to see them, you can learn a little bit about them. But at the same time, it's a little bit selfish because we all get to gather together again and celebrate the very, very hard and incredible work that we did as a team. So I'm gonna introduce everybody and let everyone sort of introduce themselves, kind of who they played in the productions this year, and sort of what your experience with the black box rep has been so far. So like I said, my name's Emily Van Fleet. I directed A Midsummer Night's Dream, but I was also in the acting company. So I played Greta Olsen in Murder on the Orient Express, the Swedish one, and also Alicia in the play that never was, Small Mouth Sounds, which you'll hear a living room chat back about next week. Let me pass it on to Anastasia Davidson, who is on the YouTube to my right, with the fireplace in the background. And Anastasia, who did you play in Midsummer Night's Dream?
Hi, everyone. I played Helena in A Midsummer Night's Dream, as well as Tom Snout the Wall and a fairy named Moth.
Excellent. And what season, this is your first season with the Black Box, right?
Yes, my first season with the Arvada Black Box, and I was just in Midsummer Night's Dream. So that was my one show with the company, and I feel so fortunate to have been able to do it with them, and also the fact that we got to open and run for a couple weeks before it got canceled for the season. But it was a wonderful experience.
Yeah, Midsummer Night's Dream had just sort of launched. We got a handful of performances in there before we closed. My biggest regret is that we didn't get to do any student matinees, that we had actually closed down. It was March 4th was the last performance of Midsummer. I actually got to see that one. So what's that?
March 4th was a Wednesday matinee. Is that what we ended
matinee?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it was the final performance before we went into tech for Small Mouth Sounds. We were getting ready to open the third production, and I was actually at that performance. So I was lucky enough to see opening and closing of A Midsummer Night's Dream. But Stacey, you've done rep before, right? So you have some experience with juggling several parts at once and things like that. What's the most exciting thing about performing in rep for you?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think that the most exciting thing is that nothing ever feels like you're just in this rhythm with it, and you get a little repetitive, and that can sometimes happen to me when I'm just doing one show at once, especially for a particularly longer run. Mm-hmm. It's not quite as challenging as when you've got a couple different roles happening at once and you can switch back and forth with them each night. So for example, when I did A Doll's House and A Doll's House Part 2 at the Denver Center, it was always fresh because we were always coming back with the new show, and you were just trying new things, and it kind of felt like you were getting thrown out on stage each night, and you just hope that it was all still there and that everything would fall into place, and it always somehow does, which is the exciting part. And it gives you such a trust in your other actors that you're with on stage. It creates a beautiful sense of ensemble, and you really do, in rep more than anything, rely on your fellow actors, which I think is quite beautiful.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I would echo everything that you just said about rep theater. It's something truly unique, and something that we're all just very lucky to have in our lives and to participate in, even until March 12th. We're very lucky to have that. Madeline Chilese is here, and she is to Anastasia's right on the YouTube channel. Maddie, you want to introduce yourself, who you played this season?
Yeah, I'm Madeline Chilese, and I was Hermia in Midsummer Night's Dream, and then I also was the fairy Peace Blossom, and then I was Starveling, who played Moonshine. And then I understudied 2 roles in Murder. I understudied Countess and Mary, and then I understudied Emily, actually, in Small Mouth Sounds as Alicia.
What was it like being an understudy? You got to go on too. You had quite an exciting understudy experience.
Yeah, in retrospect, I would say it was really wonderful and exciting, but if you asked me in the moment, it was incredibly stressful.
The nature of the rep contract, it's a pretty long contract, and we're running shows for 3-4 months, and undoubtedly somebody gets sick or something happens, and we hope that nobody gets hurt, but sometimes things happen. And you know, due to the very physical nature of A Midsummer Night's Dream, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, one of our actors, Jess Austen, brilliant woman, was out for a couple performances, and Maddie stepped in last minute. And you know, I've been an understudy before, and I've never had to go on, which is insane. And I have all the respect in the world for understudies who don't get the same kind of rehearsal process that the actors do, and they just jump in, and Maddie did a terrific job. So it was really great to have her involved in Midsummer Night's Dream. But the only time I actually got to perform with her was during Murder on the Orient Express.
Yeah. Yeah, and I actually had talked to several actors who had understudied before at the Arvada Center, and they're like, I've never gone on. And I was like, oh, great. So I was like super confident. I was like, I'll just memorize my lines and just enjoy the show. And then, you know.
Yeah, it's all part of the fun.
Life. Yeah. But it was an incredible experience. And I got to be in a time period costume, which is always like the little girl in me loves. So
the costumes were gorgeous.
Yes, they were stunning.
So continuing on clockwise, we have Annie Barbour underneath Madeline. Annie, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Annie Barbour, and I played Puck as well as Peter Quince and Phyllis Straight in Midsummer Night's Dream, and on Murder on the Orient Express, I was the Countess, and I was lucky enough not to have to understudy this year. Oh, that's not entirely true. I ended up having to understudy the teacher in Small Mouth Sounds, which was a joy to work on. I also got to assistant direct that. So I had fingers in every pie. So that was fun.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Annie, this is your second season with the Rep, yeah?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yay.
Yes.
What's your favorite thing about Rep Theater?
Oh, Stace said a lot of it. It's the joy of getting to play different characters at the same time. It just really, it allows you to inform the other, because it will be a production of murder, and I'll be doing murder, and then afterwards it's like, wow, it's so nice to kind of have those quiet one-on-one acting scenes, and then I'll jump over to Midsummer, and it feels like it's the best marathon ever, and I'm running around like crazy. But at the same time, it's like, oh, that sense of urgency I feel backstage in Midsummer, that can be helpful on stage in Murder, and then that stillness I find in Murder, oh, you know what, maybe I should take a breath before I go into this monologue as Puck. So it's just a constant, it's a continual exercise for me as an actor, doing Rep, which just makes me, hopefully in my mind, better. But yeah, and the people, because you get to establish such a family, and you build so much trust with your ensemble and the people that you rely upon to go into the woods with, and then to go on the train with. The people is half of the joy of doing it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome, Annie. And last but not least, Jake Mendes is here. Hi, Jake.
Hi.
Tell yourself. Who are you? Who did you play?
My name's Jake Mendes, and I played Demetrius in Midsummer Night's Dream, as well as Mustard Seed and Francis Flute. And then in Murder, I played Hector McQueen, and in Small Mouth Sounds, I played Rodney. And I did not understudy. Thank goodness, because after seeing Maddie just kick so much butt, I was like, oh, I probably wouldn't have been able to do that. So really, really grateful for that. But yeah, it was a lot of material to learn for all three shows.
Yeah, awesome. Welcome. I gotta say, here and now in front of the world, that these four are some of the hardest working performers in showbiz. They along with Jessica Austen and Kate Gleason and Jeffrey Kent and Zach Andrews were just total rock stars. This cast went above and beyond, and they were asked to do a lot in this show, physically and emotionally, and just juggle all these different roles and all these different through lines and plots, and they did it extremely well. And it was, you know, I was so proud of how this production turned out. It was a lot of work putting it up and putting all the pieces together, and it was this crazy manic marathon, like Annie said, but man, it was so freaking fun. And my biggest regret was that more people didn't get to see it, and y'all didn't get to have you know, that awesome 2-month run that we were looking forward to. But I'm so happy to be here with you all and to sort of celebrate it and reminisce a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about the process of what went into picking the show and sort of the idea behind the concept. Marcus, if you wouldn't mind, Marcus on the tech side of things, pulling up the cast photo, just because you can see these 4 in their base costume look, and then also the rest of the cast. Great. Just to say that Lynn Collins, who our fearless leader, artistic director at the Black Box, was really interested in bringing Shakespeare back to our audiences. There they are. Look at those beautiful people with the monkey bars and swing. So Lynn was really interested in bringing Shakespeare back to our audiences because it had been a while since the Arvada Center had done Shakespeare. And I think particularly for our student audiences, it was really important to offer that to folks, and in an unconventional way. So one of my favorite things to do is concept Shakespeare, you know, taking Shakespeare out of the 1600s and putting it in a contemporary setting with contemporary costumes. And, you know, these themes are so timeless, and we talk about that all the time. And it's really fun to see Shakespeare placed in different eras to really highlight how timeless they are. And so this play about the sort of transformative nature of love and magic and mischief is really translated in a number of different ways, and has been for centuries. And Lynn in particular was interested in telling this story in a contemporary way, which I was super excited about. I also love the idea of ensemble Shakespeare. So a few actors, you know, a really tight ensemble playing multiple characters. So when Lynn approached me about directing the show, I thought, okay, it's a lot, you know, it's 21 characters or something. And I thought, I think I could do it with maybe 12, but then I somehow was like, oh no, I'm pretty sure I can do it with 8 actors. And and we figured it out. And it basically means that every single one of the lovers in the court also plays a mechanical, and they also play a fairy. And so these 4 and Jessica Austin were like busy. We'll just say that. And but it was also, you know, so I thought about putting it in a contemporary setting, but also sort of a timeless setting. And at the time I thought, well, maybe something kind of post-apocalyptic, where there's a lot of junk around, and we kind of like take found objects and they become something else. And so I got really into sort of post-apocalyptic fiction and films and TV shows, and read the book Station 11 by Emily St. John. That's her name, right? Mm-hmm. And she and that was fascinating. Little did I know how sort of prophetic this production would be. It was all kind of fantasy at the time, but ultimately we decided to place this in a sort of post-apocalyptic playground. And I think, Marcus, we have some inspiration photos in there, some design inspiration. And just chatting with Brian Malgrave, our scenic designer, he immediately was super excited about oh, here's an image that I found that just struck me like early on, was this illustration of this pile of junk and this sort of these two arcs and this platform in the middle. And I don't know what it was about this image. You can't really pick out specific things in there, but it's a pile of junk, but it's this beautiful sculpture, this beautiful piece of art. We can just keep going through these. Let's see. Here's another image that inspired me, this idea of this flower blooming in the middle of this seemingly desolate landscape. Next, please. Great. So, after some chats and some brainstorming with Brian, we finally settled on this idea of an abandoned school playground. And I had looked at a lot of images of Chernobyl and I was really interested in the juxtaposition of something that used to be a place very recognizable as a place where there was tons of joy and whimsy and play and fun and imagination, and that having gone, kind of been forgotten. Keep going, Marcus. Yeah, so here's an image of an abandoned merry-go-round, which you'll see shortly we used in our set. Keep going. And the next one, we could probably go through these pretty similar. This image struck me quite a bit. The dumpster. This is Brian's brilliant idea to have a dumpster in our set. So they built a dumpster for us, and it was kind of a magic dumpster because folks could pop in and out of it. There was an entrance from behind where people Puck could make some surprise reveals, and you could also walk on top of it as well, and people pulled things from it. Keep going. Great, so here's our scenic rendering by Brian Malgrave, who's just, I cannot say enough positive stuff about Brian. He's just so wonderful, and he really made this world come alive for us. If you're familiar with the Arvada Center Black Box, this is the first time we've done anything in the round. So I wanted to find a location and a set that really celebrated being in the round. And I thought, what better than a playground? So as you can see, we have a set of monkey bars here and our merry-go-round down to the right, a little bit askew, and some tires and a little mound here. And there's our dumpster up left. So the idea is that with this concept of 8 actors, it's a troupe of performers that come in and encounter this abandoned place and decide to create art there. That their mission in life is to go around and find from sort of sad location to sad location and make it beautiful again by performing and gathering a crowd. So the audience at the Arvada Center was our crowd that we gathered, and this was the stage. So throughout the performance, the swing came down and the merry-go-round was fixed and started working again, and we brought a little bit of beauty, we hope, into this space. Keep going, Marcus. Awesome. So that was our set design. I also had a lot of great chats with let's look at our lighting inspiration. John Olson, who is our lighting designer, added such amazing texture and beauty to this set. The idea that our world is maybe a little overcast, but every once in a while you just see some sun shining through the clouds, some hope there. And he here's a really striking image of something very recognizable that has now become something else or means something different. Keep going. Yeah, so this idea of sun breaking through the clouds. And, when we got into the woods and you can kind of keep going through these, Marcus, we got into the forest, and John brought these amazing sort of woods gobos and texture and things to bring the woods out. Oh yeah, this image is interesting to me just because it sort of illustrates the difference between the death and desolation and the beauty and the hope. that we find towards the end of the play. So, you know, when it came to the fairies and the, you'll see some production photos a little bit later, but the magic that the fairies brought to the world, he used such beautiful colors and this haze effect. So you could see these beams of pink light and white light on the lovers as the magic spells were taking over them. It was really, really gorgeous. To talk a little bit about costumes. Awesome. So we have some costume inspiration, which we'll just like go through pretty quickly. But these are some sort of post-apocalyptic images of pieced together costumes. Let's keep going. Yeah, some like rags and different post-apocalyptic fashion that inspired both Claire Henkel, our costume designer, and myself, adding soft and also hard textures together. These dresses were kind of an inspiration for Madeline's costume, and this sort of distressed clown trench coat with the flower, and a lot of hardware, a lot of belts. You know, thinking practically, what would people have? They would piece together whatever they could find, and then they would probably be carrying a lot of their provisions with them. I'll stop here on this image of the kids. So we're in a playground. Presumably there's a school nearby, and a lot of these pieces that the actors would find became part of their costumes. So the lovers, Madeline, Jake, and Anastasia, would put on, and Jess Austen would put on a cardigan or a tie or a skirt from a school uniform, and that became the lovers' look. Keep going. Good. This is our photo for Annie Barbour's Quince hat. So as Puck, she had this cool kind of, you'll see the rendering shortly, but she had this really cool kind of jacket, like leather jacket, and this cool like choppy white wig. For Peter Quint, she had this little this bowler hat that became kind of her look, for her mechanical look. And let's look at these renderings. Oh, speaking of which, so here's Annie as Puck. So this is kind of the base look. Annie, what was your favorite part about this costume?
Definitely the jacket. The jacket just added such a nice level of like of badass mischief, that, and Claire Henkel, our costume designer, added some lovely detailing on it, and she worked with me throughout the process too, because I was so physical throughout, that I couldn't have a lot of things that would like snag as I'm running. So she did these cool paint designs, and some texturing on the back, and that was one of my favorite parts. But I have to say that the wig was Puck. As soon as the wig came on, I was like, oh, there we are. Great. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Diana Benkiki did some amazing work with the wigs. Not everybody was wigged in this show, but
just me,
wig.
Zach, and Kate. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Jake.
Jake, how could I forget?
How could you forget?
And, you know, it was really important to both Claire and myself that these costumes not only, you know, had a fun post-apocalyptic aesthetic sensibility to them, but that they were very, very functional for and conducive for the physical activity that the actors were required to do, because they were spinning around on a merry-go-round and climbing monkey bars. I mean, it was just constant physical work, and the demands were incredible. And so, you know, we were in communication very frequently about, well, okay, these pant legs are a little too long, so we don't want them caught on the bars, so let's shorten them a little bit, or we need to take off some of the more, you know, cumbersome elements of the embellishments and paint something on here instead. But I think that the ultimate design aesthetic was incredible, and everything functioned extremely well. Keep going. Thank you. Oh, here's Anastasia. Oh my gosh, Anastasia, talk to me about this costume.
I really loved my costume. I think one of my most vivid memories in trying it on was that Claire would give me a piece and it would be like new and nice, and she would have bought it and it still had the tags on it. And she had this idea of, you know, like a lot of stuff is very worn and that we've just found these items. And so the pants, as you can see here, they have slits up them. And then I've got these leggings on underneath. And so she just said, okay, well, let's just cut them. And she was like, it's not going to look perfect, but it doesn't have to look perfect. So like literally I was standing in the dressing room and they would just hack off the top part of my sweater, and oh, we're going to have her in kind of like a crop top. So they just cut off half the shirt and cut down the pants. And it just ended up, my actual costume ended up looking so similar to that. And I think it came out really beautiful. And yet at the same time, we were like, well, let's make it really dirty and let's cut this piece. And you could wear this little piece that we cut in your hair, maybe if you want to. And Claire actually found this little crystal just lying in a parking lot. She saw it on the ground and she picked it up and she ended up making it into a necklace that Helena wore. And I thought that was really cool too, because it was an actual found item that she incorporated into my costume.
Nice. Awesome. I love those pants. They really did look a lot like that. Here's Jake as Demetrius, or your sort of base look. Jake, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, the jacket and belt came off pretty quickly, but this gives an idea of like sort of what the like traveling troupe person, like acting troupe person would be kind of looking like as they were going from place to place, right? So there's your bag and making sure you're warm enough and all the layers and whatnot. The hair, I remember we had, maybe it was opening night, like a reception afterwards. And there was this man who came up and he just looked completely astonished and said, wait a minute, that wasn't your real hair? And I was like, no, first of all, no. Second of all, if it was my real hair, did you even, it was cut here and then this was long and this was short. And then, so I would be a crazy person if I had my actual hair like that. So no, it was not my real hair, but just a testament to how great Diana Benkiki is for her wig design.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of my favorite parts of my costume was towards the end of the play when we got to do the play within the play. And I had my Thisbe costume on, which was like basically like a big tablecloth that I wore as like a sash, and then like a table runner that I had as my little, like my mantle, my little headpiece. And then of course I had my little dog when I was Francis Flute. We named him Jonathan. He was like this kind of beat up, roughed up stuffed animal. Yeah, it was great. It was really fun. Definitely not the types of costumes that I that I usually wear. Very different from Hector McQueen, who was in a three-piece suit and tie.
Yeah, it's a nice change from how it's very clean and
Yeah.
perfect and put together. Yeah, everything in Murder was. And Jake, underneath this coat, had this striped shirt, and he put on a school tie, a uniform tie that was blue and gold. Those were the school colors. So all the lovers had, Anastasia had a blue navy skirt. Maddie, which we'll see shortly, had a yellow cardigan. Jake had a tie, and Jessica Austin as Lysander had a blue blazer. So those are kind of their lover looks. And then they all had different pieces for mechanicals, which we'll see some of those in production photos as well. Let's see who's next. This was Jeffrey Kent. Jeff played Aegeus, and he also played one of the fairies and a troupe member, of course, part of the ensemble, and most notably Nick Bottom. So this was kind of his traveling look. And then he added various things for Bottom. This is Kate Gleason as Titania and Hippolyta. She had a beautiful wig as well. And Jazz Austin, I just have to stop and talk about this because she had this amazing leather jacket, and she ended up looking very much like this. Sometimes, especially when you're doing a contemporary show or shows that are pieced together with contemporary clothing, you don't always end up with what's on the rendering, this image that the costume designer conceives of months and months in advance. You don't always end up with that look, but Jess looked very much like this. She had these tall, amazing boots and this really cool jacket. And, the idea is that this troupe is made up of 5 women and 3 men. And there are a number of roles that just have to be played by women. So she ended up playing Lysander, which I will have to, shout out to Jess Austin. She played one of the funniest Lysanders under the love spell that I have ever seen in my life. It was just so much fun sort of conceiving of this typically, a role that's typically played by a male, being played by this incredibly dynamic female actor. So anyway, I absolutely love this costume, and she just completely rocked it. Here's Zach Andrews. Well, this is Zach Andrews as Oberon. This look ended up looking a little bit different. We went away from sort of the warrior with him a little bit, just because in the rehearsal process, it just felt like he needed to feel a little more empathic and compassionate. And so we lost the spear and sort of the weaponry. He ended up wearing this really cool sort of patched together doublet, which is very reminiscent, of course, of a Shakespeare doublet period costume. But of course, it was just being used as in their trunk of clothes, and it looked really, really cool. Keep going. Here's Madeline. Let's talk about this a little bit.
I actually, when Anastasia was talking about this, it reminded me of my fitting when Claire was putting on like all these brand new pieces, and like my costume had a ton of layers to it on the top. And I remember like looking and seeing like this tank top and a nice t-shirt, and like, I'm like, what is, okay. She goes, it's not gonna look like this. It's not gonna, I'm like, I don't know what is gonna, I have no idea. And then like, so then like seeing it kind of like coming to life and like the things, it was a really cool process to see like the steps that I went through. I loved my sleeves and my boots. Those were my favorite things, because like my sleeves, I felt like they perfectly encapsulated the ingenue who has just like this rage monster inside, which is how I feel Hermia can be. So like the boots were like really like cute and fun and punky. But they had like a weight to them. And so when I jumped off quite a few things. And so whenever I jumped off, it really added like this weight and heaviness. And so I really appreciated, they made my job a little easier. And then like the sleeves kind of added to like the Hulk smash mentality of like, just like ripping the sleeves off and like, all right, let's do battle. So I had a lot of fun. Those are probably my favorite elements about that piece.
Awesome. Yeah, and Maddie for her starveling look had this adorable little kid's unicorn apron. Starveling the tailor, so the idea was she had this apron that she just added to this, and it was like you'll see. I think we have a cute photo of Maddie in her starveling look. Awesome. Is that everybody? Did we get everybody?
I think so.
Yes. All right, let's bring it back to us, Marcus. I'm curious from y'all what it's like performing Shakespeare versus not Shakespeare, classical text and verse, what you love about it, and what are some challenges. And I guess, Annie, I'll start with you, either with Midsummer Night's Dream or just Shakespeare in general.
Mm-hmm. I find Shakespeare to be kind of like coming home for me in terms of working with it. I was lucky enough as a kid that I spent a lot of my summers as a nerd at like Shakespeare camp. The verse, the meter of iambic pentameter when you're speaking in verse instead of prose, which you'll also find in Shakespeare. you just know immediately if you've messed up because you'll be going along and then it's like, oh, wait, I am off the meter. That does not scan. That is incorrect. There was one time during the show when I was putting Lysander, Jessica Ashton, under the first love spell with the flower because Puck has messed up and has mistaken Lysander for Demetrius. And I believe it's, when thou wakest, let love forbid sleep his seat on thy eyelid. So awake when I am gone, I'll tell my queen of the anon. And I immediately started saying the second love spell that I say to Lysander later on reverses the spell. So it's when thou wakest, you'll love your lady, your former love. But you just know right away if you're wrong, which I think is such a great kind of just tool as the actors, like that you have to honor the script and the text for it. And I also love the text analysis part of it, where you get to where you might initially be overwhelmed with poetry and be like, what does this metaphor mean that goes on for 5 lines? But I love kind of dissecting it and decoding what it means, and then having an ownership of it for myself. And I just have a lot of fun doing Shakespeare. So it's one of my favorite things to be doing. Yeah. And Midsummer Night's Dream was a blast too, because I've always wanted to be an impish fairy for quite some time. And I was glad to finally do it.
Yes. Awesome.
Yeah.
What about you, Jake?
I was terrified to do this play. I was so scared. This is my first time doing repertory theater. So much less, it's not a musical. I'm doing 3 plays at the same time. It's a 6-month contract. And in Shakespeare, I'm playing 4 roles, right? So fully outside of my comfort zone. But it really taught me a big lesson to not doubt myself or try to trust myself a little bit more. You know, there's always these kind of demons as an actor as you're putting yourself out to perform for people. It's not it's you know, you are on stage. It's not a piece of paper that you wrote up or a report or anything. It's you, it's your body and your feelings. And so it was outside of my comfort zone, to say the least. But being a part of this group, it was so great because everyone was just unbelievably supportive, like supportive to say the least, right? It was really easy to talk about the things that I was feeling stressed about or not so sure about. And since this was kind of a new take in terms of like the style of the show, I felt a little bit more comfortable with the text because it was modernized a little bit. You know, I didn't have to be in such a period with my speaking and whatnot. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but it was cool. It was really cool. This is only the 2nd Shakespeare play I've ever done. I really wish it could have gone longer because I was really starting to kind of celebrate this success of overcoming something I was really terrified of. But yeah, I thought it was really cool. And we had a text and vocal coach. His name was Jeffrey Parker, and he was just unbelievable. He is just a pro with Shakespeare, and he helped us to really break down just word by word what things mean, how to put different emphasis on different words to make this story come across in a little bit of a different way, to communicate a little bit better. So not just how to say the words, but how to emphasize the story by using the words in a different way. And he put my mind at ease in several different moments, but he was like, you know, musical theater people are really great at Shakespeare because they understand the sort of musicality of how this text can be portrayed. So it helped me gain a little bit of confidence.
Jeffrey Parker is a badass mofo. I will say that here now for the world to hear. I know everybody was singing his praises last week, but he taught me, you know, I thought I knew this play. And I've done it several times, but he taught me so much about this play that I am eternally grateful for. And just the way that Shakespeare uses poetry and different forms of poetry to sort of emphasize different things. And the fairies speak very differently than the lovers, and the lovers speak very differently when they're under the spell versus when they're not under the spell. It's fascinating. And so he was just like absolutely incredible. I am so grateful for Jeffrey Parker. We could do a whole podcast series just with him about this. Hi, kitten. Jake's cat.
Here's my cat.
This is what's great about our lives right now.
Yeah.
Stace, you've done some Shakespeare before. Was this experience like wildly different? How did it compare to your other processes with text and things like that?
This process was different. I think every time I do any play, it's its own unique experience and process. I don't have a ton of training in Shakespeare. This was my first time doing A Midsummer Night's Dream, and I usually find that when I don't have a lot of experience with a particular play, I can get, as Jake said, really intimidated very quickly, and also feel like I don't deserve to approach the text because I don't know enough. It's that inferiority complex. But I do find that, as Annie said, through doing your text analysis and doing your homework, it can empower you. So one of my favorite parts about doing Shakespeare is learning exactly what everyone is saying and why they're saying it, because that allows me to understand the work and the play. And when I understand it, I can have so much more fun with it. So going through all of these separate characters' lines and breaking it down bit by bit and knowing what they're saying gives them this human quality that it's hard for me to just see upon a first read, or even when I watch it, it's hard for me to see right away. So I find that if I understand what I'm saying and I can bring it down to a really human level, hopefully audience members, once their ear tunes into it after the first 10 to 15 minutes, they can see it in a really human light. And that is just a wonderful experience.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Maddie, how about you? What was your experience with working text in this or other productions? Because I know you've done some Shakespeare before.
I love Shakespeare. I mean, there's always so much to learn. I say like the very reasons I love it are also the very reasons that it makes me want to pull my hair out. So like when I first approach it, I'm just so like, the thing I love about it is the amount of potential that the show, like that the text has. Like every line has like 10 different ways that you can say it, and all of them would be completely justified within that objective or that way of the character's thinking. And I feel like I see that diversity and choice in Shakespeare more than I see it in a lot of modern work. So when I first started, it's so overwhelming to me because there's so many directions and places I can go with it. But the more I get like the director's vision, the costumes, and then like having like Jeffrey Parker to like coach me, and then having my own perception of like what I think who this character is and what they want. Then once I've done all that homework, performances are so fun because every night I'm like, I'm gonna do it this way. This is a style of Hermia that I'm gonna be, and like, well, this is my Hermia tonight, or Starveling, and there's such a sense of play, and then all the other actors are doing it too, so everyone's giving you something a little different, which then changes it even more. And so it makes performances and long runs of it incredibly gratifying, I think. But the rehearsals can be really daunting.
Yeah, they can be. It can be a lot of work, just the text work, and with this show in particular, the physicality, which we'll talk a little bit about next. But it's the thing that's so beautiful about live theater is that every performer, and even the crew, the stage management, and the board ops and the technicians come together every night, and they bring to it who they are in that moment, right? So they bring whatever whatever they're dealing with that day. And, you know, obviously our main goal is to tell the story, and the story doesn't change that much from, you know, from show to show, and the text is what it is. But, you know, every day you sort of approach something with a slightly different perspective, and Shakespeare text allows you to interpret that in so many different rich ways, and so many different layers that you can find to keep it constantly fresh. And it's a really, really exciting thing to get to do night after night. I'm curious, before we talk about staging a little bit, if any of you all are sort of like, what are you doing to keep your craft alive, or keep staying creative while you're in quarantine and while we're sitting here with our tea in front of our fireplaces? Is there anything, Anastasia, you mentioned to me on a different night that you have a list of plays that you're reading. How's that going?
It's going pretty well. I dropped off a little bit, but I am trying to read a lot more plays during this downtime, which has been quite nice. And fun fact, when I was in grad school, one of my apprenticeship jobs was to actually scan my professor's play collection, because he was slowly moving from all of his hard copies to a virtual collection of all of his plays. And I spent hours upon hours just standing at the copier and scanning these plays, like flipping each page, scanning it. And he had, I don't know how many plays, probably over 100 at least, that I did, because he worked on them himself too. And so now if I ever want a play, I always email him first, because I know he probably has a scanned copy of it. And so I know he has a What's that, Annie?
I was just saying, I know you have this. I scanned it for you.
Right. I scanned it myself. I know you have it. So my most recent play that I read was John Patrick Shanley's Women of Manhattan, which came out in 1986. And I had never read it before. And it was one of my good friend's most favorite plays. And she gets a ton of monologues from it. So I thought I put it on my list and I read it.
Nice. I will say that I'm going to preface this, although I should have before I asked Stace, but I knew that she was reading plays, so I sent it to her first. But with this question, it's a tricky one to answer right now, I think, because as artists, it can be really daunting and difficult to find ways to still be creative during this time. And so, one of the best pieces of advice that I was given early in my career was sometimes you just need to not do theater. Sometimes you just need to not be creative and just live your life and start gardening, or I don't know, build a bookshelf, or I don't know, whatever normal people do, but to get life experience and play with your dogs and have a heart to heart with your loved ones. Those things can be just as informative to your craft and the art that you did and what you bring to your art when you're allowed to do your art again with other people. So before I put this question onto everybody else, I'm giving them permission to say absolutely nothing. I've done absolutely nothing creative because I'm just, figuring out life now. And I've certainly had those days and those weeks since we closed the season where I was just like, I don't want to do anything. I just want to bake. I just want to watch Netflix and watch other people do their art. But I do my best to try to find ways to still be creative and still be inspired. Whether it's working on new music for a musical that hopefully I'll get to perform someday, or teaching voice lessons to people who are working on their art. So I'm just kind of putting that out there first so that everybody feels like it's okay. It's okay to just be a human being and not create. And the day that you feel inspired, something beautiful will come out of you, and that will be wonderful. But did the rest of you, do you feel like what are you doing, Maddie?
So I heard once, and like from one source, so it's a fact now in my head, that Nobel Prize winners, like 80% of them who win, usually have a lot of hobbies outside of their field. So I actually try to keep that in mind, of like trying to have things that are completely unrelated to what I'm doing and where I'm trying to go. So like I'm learning Spanish on Duolingo. So yo quiero aprender más.
Ooh.
And then like for the creative side of me, I mostly have just been kind of consuming art. So like watching National Theater post their shows on YouTube and just kind of enjoying, like, sometimes you get so caught up in the business of being a performer, and like it's nice to just kind of be an audience member and just enjoy art, and that it's fun and beautiful and thought-provoking. And so yeah, I guess that's really how I'm engaging, is just consuming it. Yeah,
that's really important. And when we're performing so much, especially in this contract, the Black Box Rep, we're so lucky that we are working a long time, and we have performances most days, so we don't get to see a lot or consume a lot. So it's really nice to get to do that. Annie, what are you up to?
Consuming a lot. I've been reading a lot, which I was kind of making a point earlier this year to try and be better at while balancing everything. And now I only have that. So it's been getting a lot of attention, which has been good. It's kind of reading those books that you always say that, oh, I should read that, and you set it aside. So I'm very, very, very slowly working my way through War and Peace. But then watching a lot of Netflix and HBO on the side. And particularly, I'm trying not to like rewatch old shows for the sake of comfort, but find new things that I haven't explored before. And because I'm not a big television watcher. So that's been interesting. And it's interesting to hear different writers' voices that I'm not familiar with. And for me, theater is such a person-to-person experience that I'm kind of allowing a little break at the moment for right now, and that's okay. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
Nick, because you're really big into musical theater. I mean, a lot of our audiences know you from the main stage musicals and Hedwig and the Angry Inch and lots of other musical theater stuff. Are you singing right now, or? I mean,
yeah, I'm singing. I'm going down to check it on my parents' house in Lakewood. So that's about a 40-minute drive from where we are right now. I'm with my boyfriend. So I'm just singing at the top of my lungs in the car, which is really nice. I'm baking a lot. I'm just a baker now. So who knows if I'll ever do a play again, because I'm just gonna open a bakery.
You could play a baker in a play.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It is nice just to sit down. I'm just sitting down. We're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and we're sitting down and eating bread.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Good for you. I made some Reese's peanut butter banana bread, just like, the fattiest. Yeah. It's the best. You just throw gobs of peanut butter and Reese's in there and then bake it up.
I'm doing a lot of cooking. I'm not a good baker, but I've been experimenting with dinner. Dinner has been like a fun, like little staple at the end of the day to like, I snack constantly throughout the day. And then dinner, I make a meal and it's going to be in the oven. All the burners will be used, Yeah.
Yeah. Marcus, let's look at some of these production photos because I'm dying to talk a little bit about the final product with these guys. We talked a bit about how physical the show was, and kind of while we're talking through these production photos, I'm curious, for me as a director, it was a challenge to stage a play. So here we are again with the cast in the monkey bars, but to stage a play without these actual pieces, because for those of you who aren't in theater, we don't often get the full set from the first day of performances, or excuse me, the first day of rehearsal. So you're kind of like, you arrive at the rehearsal room and everything's sort of taped out on the floor, but you're kind of you're making believe, you're play pretending that you're crossing the monkey bars now, and for a show that is so kinesthetic, right? So a set that requires so much actual climbing and spinning, it's, it was challenging for us to, oh, look, there's Kate and Zach are over on it to Tanya. I'm just going to pause for a minute to talk about how beautiful Kate's hair is and how beautiful Zach's hair is, which some of it is his own and some of it is a piece that they sort of
French braided. Yeah,
they braided it into his actual hair.
Mm-hmm.
But we spent many, many weeks just sort of staging this play in a way that we thought would work once we had our set pieces. And fortunately, thankfully to Brian Malgrave and the Scene Shop, we were able to have some of these set pieces earlier on. Because often you don't really get to be on the set until a week or so before previews. And we were able to kind of spend a few days off and on playing with this playground equipment, but a lot of it was just kind of like, well, I hope I'm going to be able to do this. Stace and Maddie in particular, because you had a lot of monkey, well, Annie too, tons of monkey bar activity. What was that like, transitioning from the rehearsal room to the, let's keep going to the next photo. I think there's one of Annie kind of dangling, and there's Jess Austin as Lysander and Madeline as Hermia.
And my boots.
The boots, your faves. There's Stace as Helena. Oh, I love that photo. And I'm not sure that these are all in show order, so Jeff Kent as Bottom. Annie, what was it like finally getting those monkey bars?
It was great. It was awesome. And because so much of it, as you already said, was just, I'm doing a really cool thing right now. Don't you worry about it. In the rehearsal space. And it was really kind of, I was so grateful that we have such a long tech process for the Arvada Center, because that allowed so much opportunity for me to explore and just kind of get a chance to play on them. And then you're timing out like a text, like monologue with your movement on the bars. Mm-hmm. So throughout our tech process, I found different variations of different ways to get up and get down and find cool hangs. And it's really just a process of trial and error. But once I was on it, it just opened up a huge world. And it just really, like the same way that a wig kind of changed, even though you have an idea, you know who your character is, you've made decisions and you have objective and desires and opinions, but sometimes that other layer just comes on and it just really clicks into place. And the monkey bars were a huge key in for me, just in the physical life of Puck specifically. Yeah.
Nice. We will find a photo of you and some of your incredible hangs on these monkey bars, because I still don't know how you did half the things you did. But here we have Anastasia and Madeline in the lovers' quarrel, which notoriously it can be an extremely physical scene for the four lovers. Shout out to Jeffrey Kent, who is our fight director, who I don't know if he knew exactly what he was in for when he signed on for this job. He also played Bottom, so it was really helpful to have him in the room a lot of days, and just sort of looking out for, obviously, as you can imagine, safety was a big concern with this show, and making sure everybody, every single move was set, and the way you placed your foot on a bar was the same every time, to avoid accidents and things like that. And Jeffrey was really, really helpful in that way, and creative, and just a really, really wonderful fight choreographer. Madeline, tell me a little bit about your experience with moving from the rehearsal room to these monkey bars, to this playground.
It was in the rehearsal room, man, you are in your mind, you're just incredible, like, oh, I'm gonna be doing this, and then I'll like flip off, and everyone will go, whoa, and I'll be like, yeah, and then you get on the bars and you're like, oh my gosh, this is hard, this is so hard, I can't breathe, and my fingers are sweating, and so it was a learning curve, and it was so fun though, like it was that kind of like, I don't know, there aren't many times in plays where you feel powerful because of like all the activities you're doing. You know what I mean? Like you might say like a powerful line, or really look at someone with intention, but like to move with confidence like a dance. I don't do musical theater, so like to do really well fight choreography like Jeffrey Kent made for us, you have to have the precision of like a dancer. And so that was really fun for me and really challenging to like kind of have that mentality and get it down to a rhythm, be like, okay, when you say this line, then I move this way. Because Anastasia and I had a couple times, like when we were on those bars, where it took us quite a few tries to figure out when I would start trying to kick her, because if I did it too early, I could really hurt her. And if I did it too late, it looked really fake. So it was like we had to find just the right moment. So it was really, really challenging and fun.
Yeah, and this scene, I mean, you're right, Maddie. It was like a dance. I mean, it was choreographed like a dance, and it was like a 20-minute scene. And we had a half an hour fight call that mostly consisted of the choreography in this scene, just to make sure that you'd all gotten it in your bodies, and everything was sort of had been reviewed right before you did it. Stace, go ahead.
I didn't expect to find so much humor with some of our set pieces like the monkey bars. And I think that was what surprised me the most, because unlike Maddie, in the rehearsal room, I did not think I was capable of doing anything. I was terrified to get on the monkey bars, and actually spent some time scouting out playgrounds in my area to find monkey bars so I could practice, just so that I knew I could do it. Because we got into that shop and got on the monkey bars for the first time, and Annie is doing all these flips and she can like hang upside down, and I was just watching her with my mouth wide open, and so I was a little terrified to get on the monkey bars. But I think one of the most exciting things about it was that we found humor in being up there. So Jeff Kent, our fight director, helped us choreograph this little race that we did, and this picture that you can see of Helena and Hermia on the monkey bars is actually a little chase that we did around, and we kind of like went around a track almost. And it's just, I found it so hilarious, because at any time we could have just jumped off and been right there next to each other, ready to pull hair and like just get at the other person. But instead we both felt like we had to stay up on those monkey bars, which is where we found this really fun kicking moment that Maddie talked about. And we would stop at the center, and instead of dropping and really starting a true fight, we just did a bunch of kicks towards each other and then kept going. And it was so fun to discover.
Let's see if we can't find some photos of Annie in her hangs as Puck. And in the meantime, feel free to scroll through some of these photos, because these photos by Amanda Tipton Photography are just
They're
incredible.
really cool.
There's Jeff Kent as Bottom and Zach Andrews as Oberon. So in this production, I haven't talked about this yet, but we actually flipped the storylines of Oberon and Titania. So Titania, in the traditional telling of this story, Oberon is the one that sort of orchestrates the magic with the lovers, and Puck is sort of his henchman. And in our production, just to make things different, I flipped it. So it's actually, whereas normally Titania is falling in love with Bottom, the Weaver, it's actually Oberon. So here's Oberon in love with Bottom, and they're having a grand old time. What else? Let's see. What other photos can we get on those monkey bars? Oh, Jess Austin as the lion. You can see Maddie in her unicorn apron in the background. I'm curious, while we're looking through some of these production photos, there's Stace as Snout, one of the funniest snouts I've ever seen in my life. I'm not biased at all. I'm a little biased, but I still stand by it. Yeah, I'm curious because I didn't get to be around for any of these talkbacks that you guys did, because of course once the show opens I'm kind of out of it. But what were some interesting talkback questions that you guys got? Jake, is there anything that kind of stands out, or something that was sort of a consistent question you got?
A lot of people were asking why did we set it in this way, like in this post-apocalyptic sort of setting, and we got a lot of nods like, oh yeah, that makes sense, when we were talking about like, even when there is this sort of death and decay all around, or when things seem so dark, and when they're when it seems like there's no life in a place or situation that you're in, there can always be art, there can always be music or plays or dancing, or in our case, Shakespeare. So that, I think that was one of the questions we got a lot of, like, okay, I get it, but like, why is everything dead? So and then of course we get well, do you get your lines confused because you're in 3 plays, or how hard is it to do that stuff? And like, are you so tired? Are you out of breath? And the answer to all of that is yes.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, and we wouldn't trade it for the world.
That's great. Here's Annie on top of the monkey bars for this storm sequence that we brought in, and I have to shout out to Jason Ducat and John Olson for the work that they did, the design work they did on sound and lights for this storm sequence, where Puck magically brings in all the lovers and puts them all to sleep in order to sort of set all the chaos and set everything back in order. Bring order to the world again. And Annie was sort of orchestrating this from above the monkey bars. And we had lightning and thunder, and it was this beautiful. Our stage manager, Christine Moore, said it was really fun to call, because of course she's in the booth saying lights go, sound go, and she follows Annie's sort of hand motions for when to call the lightning and when the thunder needs to go. And Christine did a fabulous job.
Christine is amazing.
Yeah.
And as Maddie was saying about like the strength and ownership you feel of like a particular movement, the storm was definitely one of mine. And it was something that I think we didn't like necessarily finesse to where we got it by opening until we were in the space, just because it was Christine calling light cues with the hand movement, me coming a twirly thing from the bars, and then people running in from VOMs and figuring out how each person goes to sleep. That became a very choreographed piece, and it was really cool to do. And Christine, yeah, it's a great relationship you have with the stage manager. I think they also talked about it last week in Murder on the Orient Express, with just like it's a dance with them, and you can't see them, so you better move your hand in the same way that you used to open that door or do that magic flower.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if the show goes smoothly, it's really, the responsibility is on the stage manager, particularly. I mean, even before the director kind of hands the show off to the company, but especially after opening, and Christine, just, there's so many moving pieces to this show, and Christine and our crew just really nailed it. I cannot thank them enough for all the incredible work that they did. What else? Let's see some other photos, Marcus, while we're kind of wrapping up. I do want to say we had some, you won't be able to hear it, but of course Jason Ducat had some really, really beautiful sound design that kind of was like this electronic stuff mixed with pop music and ambient sounds, and it was kind of this amalgamation of weird I don't know. It was just like so beautiful and otherworldly, but also really recognizable. And also Zach Andrews, who you see back here by the dumpster, as Theseus. He also played Oberon, but he composed the music for 2 of the songs in our play. There was a fairy lullaby, and there's Annie hanging from the monkey bars. But Zach wrote this really, really beautiful music that the company sang, the fairy lullaby, and then our finale song. And it was really wonderful collaborating with him. And it's part of what I love about working in a company, is that yes, we're, there's this group of amazing actors, but who knew Zach Andrews also is an incredible videographer and editor and composer. And Jeff Kent is this amazing fight choreographer and an hilarious bottom. And it's cool to get to be in a company where you can use a lot of people's skills and collaborate in ways that you don't often get to do. So that's been really, really great. I also have to shout out to our props department, Melissa Green and Megan Markowitz, who I think I visited the prop shop every day during rehearsals to chat about this found object and how it becomes a hat for a fairy, or this tricycle that Puck rides around on, and or this sign that the theater troupe made to represent the woods or Athens. They were really, really wonderful to work with, and they took all of these found objects. There's Annie as Quince in her little bowler hat. And for example, this boombox in the background, we ordered this old boombox and they distressed it, so it looked like it had been used and abused, and created this whole world. It's really a gift as a director to have this idea in your head of what this world is going to be, and then see it come to life. Oh, here's an example of John Olson's beautiful magical lighting. I love this photo of Kate Gleason as Titania putting a love spell on Zach Andrews as Oberon, and this gorgeous light. So you have this sort of the contrast between this like dead, desolate landscape and this world that used to have so much joy, and then you see magic brought to it. And it's amazing how, one man's trash is another man's treasure, how you can see hope and life come back to a place that you thought was hopeless and lifeless. And that was, I think, the beauty for me about this production. Marcus, let's bring us back to us because I've gone way over time. I just want to say thank you to everyone for participating. It's so lovely to celebrate this play and everybody's amazing work. I'm sorry if I didn't mention everyone, but just know that I am so grateful for theater is the most collaborative art form there is, and it's one of the most exciting things. I'm interested to see how theater bounces back after all of this, but I know that with the passion of all these incredible artists, that it will come back and it will be more beautiful than ever. I'm curious if there's anything else that I'll go around and see if there was like one scene or one particular part of the show that was your favorite part to perform. Jake?
I admittedly had a hard time in rehearsals with the final death scene in Pyramus and Thisbe. It was quite tedious putting that all together, and it ended up being one of my favorite parts, mostly because we could talk to the audience. We were allowed to ad-lib a little bit more and like kind of work in talking to the audience and like having fun and getting those modern references in there that like we only could do in our play, you know what I mean? It just, the ways that people would laugh were so joyful during that part, and it was really, really fun.
Yeah, and speaking of that, Jake, there was a lot of like, particularly in that moment, in that scene, I guess, and in the mechanical scenes, there was like ad-libbing, right? A lot of like non-Shakespeare lines that were kind of thrown in, which I have to say, as a director, I wasn't certain that we'd be ad-libbing in the show, but it just kind of came organically. One of the instances I can think of was in Pyramus's death scenes, where this was a brilliant Jeffrey Kent idea of having Pyramus kind of and the other mechanicals enact the different famous movie deaths at the end of the play, within the play. So we had Jaws, and we had Alien for a minute, but then that ended up being too long, so we lost it in previous. But and Titanic. So there was some ad libs from each of the movies. I think Jeff was hanging from the monkey bars as if he was Jack holding onto the door in the ocean, saying, "There's plenty of room for two people up there," right before he he dropped.
People lost their minds with that ad lib. It was it was the most well received one. It was just it was so good. Yeah.
Annie, in addition to like some of your favorite parts to perform in this show, feel free to elaborate on the ad libbing too, because you know, it's something that we don't always throw into Shakespeare production.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you know, we take liberties.
I was actually, I was pretty nervous about the ad-libbing. I don't know. I just grew up with a very strict idea of what Shakespeare was. And everyone was so good at it. And I was like, oh no. And I just kept going like, okay, that was my ad-lib, was okay for a lot of Peter Quince. But with that ad-libbing, I think it kind of ties into my favorite part of the show in that I really love two moments. And it's the very beginning of our show when our lights first come up, and our house lights would come up as well. So the audience was illuminated as well. And they were already close enough in the round that I could pick you out if the house lights weren't up. So it was like, I know what color eyes you have in the back row. And I loved being able to, particularly with Puck and the kind of prologue that we created, that a lot of my text was bringing in the audience together, and to kind of have some hesitation from some people, and other people very much leaning in, and other people being like, I don't know what is happening right now. And then to have that, and to kind of, I made a point of really taking in everyone. And then by the time we got to the play within the play at the end of the show, no one cares that I'm sitting next to them and I'm nudging them about like what's going on within the play, because they've joined us on our journey. And I really loved those two moments side by side, because they came with us on the journey, and that was lovely. And it's one of the best gifts an audience can give us, I think. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, well said. I think ultimately the ad libs, I was in the same boat as you, Annie, is like, well, I'm a little bit of a purist and I don't know if we should just throw in whatever we want. But it's, you know, it's in the nature of Shakespeare. You know, there's so many asides to the odd. There's a lot of direct address written into Shakespeare. And so I think it's perfectly in spirit of the piece, especially in the round, and especially given the concept that, you know, it brings people in and engages them in a way that I think was really beautiful.
Yeah. And then also with the ad-libbing, sorry, I was just had a thought with the ad-libbing, when it came to the play within the play, I think we got pretty, like, it wasn't like a whole bunch of new ad-libs every show. We got pretty set, and what we found would resonated with people. So if like that worked, oh, I'm going to try it again, and I'll try it again, and it continues to work. So those were pretty consistent for me. Although there was sometimes like at the end of play within the play, when we finally get through all the deaths, Maddie would exit with me upstage, and they'd ask where Moonshine was, and we would do a little back and forth that would change every night sometimes. And one time I made myself laugh a little too much.
Those moments are great.
Yeah.
Maddie, what about you?
With the ad libs, one thing I really liked that we did was that the ad libs felt very specific in the sense of only certain groups did it. So like only the fairies and the mechanicals are clowns. And I like that. I liked that the royalty didn't have too much, and like the lovers really didn't do it. And so I think it made it that much more specific to the characters. So like the ad libbing still felt like it lined up with everyone.
Yeah.
Because like Hermia, I didn't ad lib at all. Kept pretty straight to the script. And then as far as like favorite parts go, I mean, my favorite part of the show is when Bonham and Oberon fall in love, because I feel like it's just such pure joy, and it reminds me of like, you know, your first crush, and like your face hurts because you're smiling so much, and like it just like they did such a good job of just being so excited and flabbergasted at the sight of each other, and I like loved that. And then just personally as an actress, my favorite part for me to do was Hermia's puppet monologue, because I am a short person, and so for Shakespeare to write a monologue about how angry she is about being called short all the time, I was like, this is amazing. Like he's gonna say it way better than I ever could, and now I get to do it. in front of an audience. So that was my favorite personal moment.
Nice. What about you, Stace?
I loved that we got to play so many different characters. I know that's a really general thing, but I just fell in love with every single one of everyone's character. And I think that we found a really great balance of, you know, making them all clear and understandable, but also so distinct in their own little ways through physicalities and through dialects and through their voices. And it just gave, I tend to get in my head a lot as an actor, which is one of my bigger challenges, but it gave me this freedom and this sense of play because one, we never stopped moving. There wasn't time to overthink anything. And two, whenever we were in that character, I could be so in the moment with that one character. And then in the next moment, because I had these sharp, clear decisions, thanks to you, Emily, as our director, and thanks to Jeff Parker and Jeff Kent through dialects and physicality, that I could just switch right into that next character and I didn't have to think too hard about it. So I loved playing all three characters. And I also particularly looked forward to the lovers' quarrel and watching the boys, Jess and Jake, just, you know, give it their everything and come after me. And it was just a joy to be that loved and that wanted, even if they were under a spell.
It was an absolute joy to watch, and for those that got to watch it, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed watching it. That was one of the wonderful things, is like, I've seen this production 100 times and it was still delightful, and I'm still surprised by you all and your beautiful work and interpretation of this piece. So thank you. And thank you to the Arvada Center for just the opportunity to do it and be part of such a wonderful company, and for giving us the chance to talk about it here for everyone who tuned in. Next week, we'll be doing a Living Room Talkback for Small Mouth Sounds, the play that never was. And I'll be there, and Jake will be there, and Annie will be there, I think, and our cast. And we'll talk about this really beautiful piece by Bess Wall that had a few previews before we closed. And it'll be really lovely to reminisce about that and share that play with you. Thank you all for tuning in again. And this was our Living Room Chatback for A Midsummer Night's Dream at the Arvada Center. Have a wonderful evening, folks. I'll let you all get back to your snowy day and your happy hour.